Now, next up, I'd like to welcome Michael Greene and Andy Atherton to the stage. Now, as many of you saw, Andy Atherton, we announced yesterday that he's joining AppNexus. During the break, ask Andy why we were eating street hot dogs in London about 3 years ago. Come on, come on. The story's not funny if they can't see you. Ask him out there. Now, Michael, it says kiss ass. Oh, Michael Greene from Forrester, one of the most powerful men in advertising.
It's always a smart decision.
Exactly. So, I'll turn it over to you guys. You're going to talk about publishers, programmatic buying. Take it away.
Right on. I'm actually going to get out of the way. We're going to start with some of everybody's favorite PowerPoint. Michael's going to go through some of the results of his research and share some insights, and we'll do some questions after it's done.
Yeah, sorry to subject everybody to PowerPoint this morning, but it's the only way I really operate, so you'll just have to deal with me. So I'm Michael Greene. I'm a senior analyst at Forrester Research. I look at ad technology and the media buying ecosystem, largely from a seller's perspective. So I'm going to talk about what I see in my lofty academic perch, and then next I think Joe Apprendi's going to come up and tell you what's actually going on. But just, so take it as you will. Oops, let me go back. So we all know programmatic buying is getting big, right? Transforming the world that we're all living in. But any of you actually recognize this image behind this slide? Good, so we do have some nerds in the audience. And I present this image.
Some?
Some. So I present this not just to speak to you that I am a fellow nerd, clearly I am, and an analyst who watches Game of Thrones, but also to make it clear that like beyond this wall, there are many myths that cloud this market. Publishers believe a lot of things about what happens in the programmatic buying world. Some of them are true, but many of them are false. And these myths continue to limit their actual monetization opportunities. So let's take a look at what I see some of the predominant myths that I hear from publishers, and let's maybe take some time to debunk them and talk about where I see reality today. First myth, hear this all the time. Any of you in this room ever go into start something called a private exchange? Right? Pretty common thing for a premium publisher these days, getting into RTB. And I think there's been, over the past year and a half, almost a consensus among, especially premium publishers, that if you're going to go into programmatic buying, this notion of private exchange is the way to go. But the reality, I think, is a lot more complex. Right? We started to use this term private exchange. What does that even mean? Anybody actually have any idea what that actually means? It's taken on so many definitions. So to me, it becomes more about, let's talk in a language about what publishers actually need and want, and then what are the capabilities that they need to actually get there. So what do publishers care about? They care about maximizing yield. They care about reducing operational inefficiencies, excess cost. They care about protecting against channel conflict and CPM cannibalization. All really worthwhile objectives, right? And when we look out to the vendor landscape, we see a variety of tools, many of which have been lumped into this notion of a private exchange that can be used to help achieve these goals. Everything from branded marketplaces, block list and whitelist, variable price floors, tiered and custom options. The tool sets are there. Now, they differ whether you're using AppNexus or another vendor or some different implementation of AppNexus, but generally we see this wide array of tool sets out in the market. But when it comes to actually implementing against these tool sets, I think the reality is that publishers need to take a more nuanced approach. And to me, that means letting some principles guide your decision making, principles that reflect the reality of the programmatic buying world, and less about buying into the latest marketing lingo. So what are these principles? Number one, it's an auction-based environment, right? Basic laws of economics work. We're trying to match buyer and seller in the best, most optimal way possible. Growing demand drives yield. So what does this mean? Classic private exchange implementation. I create little small pocket of inventory, little small pocket of demand. I try to make it work. Any of you try that tactic in the exchange environment? No, quite a few publishers have. Generally, it hasn't gone that great. And it's probably not a surprise. You take a bunch of crappy inventory, and you get a couple buyers in the room. No wonder you don't grow demand. Hard to drive yield. Second principle. You need to be both customized, but also flexible around that. Standards are important in this business. Buyers need to know what to expect. Liquidity, again, matters. But at the same time, getting beyond hard-coded rules and looking at things more like customized rules, I think could be very beneficial to most publishers. Doing things like tiered auctions, I found, creates a lot of operational inefficiencies, and again, siphoning off that demand. Third principle is you still have to own your marketing around this. We talk about branded marketplaces. I think it's an important concept. We'll talk later about the role of sales here, but remembering that having your name and the quality of your inventory represented effectively in exchange environments remains important. Standardization is there, but marketing is an element that you have to invest in. Let's go on to myth number 2. Programmatic selling is just for backfill. There's a waterfall here. I think most publishers here get that illusion. So how many people are using programmatic demand for more than just dealing with remnant inventory today? Good. I see a few hands in the room. Been successful for you? See some nodding heads. And that's a great thing, because the reality is, I find when publishers isolate their programmatic demand, they're ignoring opportunities to create a more unified, holistic approach to yield management. So what do I find? Price, of course, should ideally drive inventory allocation. Now, it's not the only factor that could potentially determine which buyer gets which impression. That's where things like custom auction rules come into play. But today, we find for so many publishers, sales channel is actually taking precedence. Right? You take your direct sold inventory, and whatever's left over at the end of the day goes to your network partners. And then if anything gets passed back to you, well, we'll give it to the programmatic guys, and maybe they can deal with it, maybe they can't. But I think that ignores some important realities. Number one is we're seeing programmatic buying extend beyond bottom barrel pricing right now. I talked to many publishers who say that CPMs they're seeing through programmatic channels equal, if not surpass, what they get through other non-guaranteed sources of inventory. And for some publishers are very competitive what they're seeing even on the guaranteed side. Depends on the type of publisher, depends how you sell, but the opportunity is there, and we see that continue to grow. The other factor, and this is a long-term factor that I think so many publishers are ignoring today, is that it's not just about your CPM. Whether you know it or not, chances are you have a business model problem. There are a lot of costs in your business, sales, operations, trafficking, delivery, that in a programmatic buying world are becoming increasingly able to automate. Taking into account those costs long-term in your business should be part of your strategy. It's part of fixing this business model problem that so many publishers have. Let's talk about myth number 3. A lot of direct response people in this room, right? Any hands? Any brand-focused buyers in this room? I think there's also a myth out in this market that programmatic buying can only power direct response. And when we look into the market, this simply isn't true. Neither today, and especially not in the future. We did a study about 6 months ago where we asked, what's the future of digital media buying? Where is it actually going? And we're big believers in the abilities of programmatic buying. We're big believers that it's going to take over the vast majority of impressions that happen in the display media world. And it's going to happen in 2 ways. We continue to have programmatic buyers. Direct response will be a major component of this. But when I look at where the growth is coming from in the programmatic buying world, as it is in the display world overall, brand buyers have a major role to play here. They're looking to buy through platforms. They're looking to buy audience-targeted impressions, not just in display, but we heard from Todd earlier. It's moving into video as well. This is going to be the way, maybe they don't execute all their buys, but a very large percentage of their impressions. Just this morning, I was on the call with a major CPG talking exactly how they were going to execute against this strategy. Now, that's not to say there's not a room still for the relationship and the handshake. Custom-based buys are going to be a substantial percentage of what brands continue to do. But these are things that can't be automated. These are programs that, because of their very custom nature, need people to actually talk and work it out. But we certainly see programmatic buying having a major role to play as brands become more interested in buying audience. Myth number 4. there's no role for your sales guy in the programmatic buying world. Hopefully, most of your sales teams are a little classier than this guy, but maybe not. They do have to work with media buyers after all.
Nice.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Just make sure you hit both sides.
Yeah. The reality, though, is that sales plays an incredibly important role in the programmatic buying world. Just happens to play a different role. If you're a seller right now, first thing you should be doing, going out there, building relationships with the big programmatic buyers today, talking and engaging with the DSPs and the trading desk. Time and time again, we find that publishers who do so get better results through their programmatic channels. Funny how that happens. Second thing, sales is going to have to become more sophisticated. Order taking is getting automated, right? This industry is going down the path of many other industries. Automation changes things. But it means that the people inside those industries need to have a more sophisticated skill set. Sales is going to be more about than taking these orders. It's going to become more about packaging. How do you put together the custom with the programmatic and use that to solve that marketer's problem? Challenging skill set, but think about hiring for it right now. Third element, and I think we alluded to this in the earlier conversation, is that data rights, that's the next minefield. It's going to be an important part of the negotiation skill set for any sales team at a publisher, whether that's happening with your existing sales force or some separate group. I'm not sure yet. But figuring out how your partners use that data. We heard the term data leakage. Sounds like a very dirty thing earlier. But we have tools out there that are giving people more insight around that today. And having your sales team be able to go out and effectively negotiate with buyers what data they get, how they use that data, under which terms, and how you charge for that is the next thing publishers really need to figure out how to do. So new skills for sales certainly coming to market, but sales still plays an important role. So what can we take away for this before I have Andy ask me some hopefully not too hard questions? Lots of myths in the market. Sales still matters. Got to think beyond just this private exchange terminology. And it's more than just backfill and direct response. It's going to be a part of how the majority of buys are done in the not-so-distant future. So with that, I'll go into the fire.
Thanks. A lot of great stuff there. Have a couple questions for you. This won't hurt a bit. So any sort of macro trend like this with the scale and scope of programmatic buying is going to leave some winners and some losers after it sweeps through. Like, I don't know what metaphor you want to use on this side of the wall or the other side of the wall. So for those publishers in the audience, just putting on that perspective, boil it down for us. What are the top 3 things that publishers need to think about to be on the good side of this change rather than to be hurt by it?
Yeah. Number 1 is denial never helps. Right, it might be the first stage of grief, but we got to move past this. We know where the money comes from in this ecosystem. It's going to continue to flow through the buy side. So getting past this stage of shock that the world is changing and accepting it is probably the first thing you have to do. Second thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is start building these relationships now. This is still very early days in the programmatic buying world. We've come a long way, but there's a lot that needs to be figured out.
Relationships with who?
Relationships, DSPs, trading desk, other important technology intermediaries like our host today.
Okay.
Very important right now because standards are still being written and you want to have a seat at the table when that happens. Otherwise, your competitors will, buyers will, you won't be able to do that. Third thing is you have to start investing, I think, in the right skill set. And that's happening on, I think, a couple levels. Most immediately, it's going to be on the sales side of the organization. We talked about some of those new skills, greater sophistication that sales has to have, especially when it comes to things like selling more complex packages. Absolutely important. But the second element where publishers, especially large publishers, I think are critically underinvested is in yield management capabilities. Having people who understand data, can sort through the vast amount of buyer information that comes through exchange environments is potentially really informative for any publisher. Right now, most of them don't have the assets to take advantage of that. Transparency cuts both ways in the programmatic buying world. It's not just for buyers, it's also for sellers. Making sure you have the people to take advantage of that is going to be critically important going forward.
That's a really good point. Yield management is an area close to my heart.
Yes,
but I want to drill in on the sales point.
Yeah.
Does this mean, can you elaborate a little bit more on the specific skill sets that you're looking for in this new breed of seller? And are you looking for them maybe in different places that you haven't thought to look for them before?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, we're seeing a merging of almost business development functionality into the sales organization. We're talking about sales teams that can be much more proactive in terms of, one, identifying that marketer's problem, especially as more buyers go direct for their programmatic buying needs. Agency trading desks will continue to play a role. Agencies will continue to play a role in this ecosystem. But I can't tell you how many advertisers come to us trying to get an understanding of how they can move more of this in-house. They understand the technology gives them the capability to. So they almost take on more of that agency functionality as well. Understanding the marketer's problem, and then aligning a variety of the publisher's assets against that problem. It could be very well some custom creative execution and sponsorship that can not be executed through programmatic buying, but then figuring out where the programmatic buying element fits into that and how that works not only across the PC screen, but increasingly across multiple devices as well. We talked about this coming to video. Yep. Certainly it's moving into the mobile space, and many of these elements are going to move into other channels as well. And doing so in a converged way is going to be essential probably for most publishers going forward.
Okay. Okay, so let's circle back to the yield management point. So when you asked your question to the audience on how many folks are using programmatic buying, not just for backfill,
yeah.
I didn't see too many hands. I can't see that well, but that combined with your point about underinvestment in yield management makes me think there might be some work that needs to be done out there. One of your key takeaways from that section was letting price drive allocation. How? Can you give some insight there? Maybe some prescriptives?
Yeah. Certainly we see people moving up their exchange tags further up in their waterfall. That's something we see a few of the smaller publishers doing right now, and it has driven success for them. They're letting actually that inventory coming through the exchange actively compete with what's coming through either the direct sales channel or other non-guaranteed sources of demand. I think that could be incredibly valuable for other publishers. Of course. So
you're saying basically don't pre-decide that
right.
Whatever demand is coming in from the direct sales channel is going to be superior to what you might get from a program.
Right, and that creates some complications, right? Yeah. And that's where the investment in the personnel to be able to make those yield management decisions becomes incredibly important. The other element is thinking about how you use things like custom auction rules to help support that yield management functionality in that case. Things like being able to favor that direct inventory inside that auction because you know you have to deliver on that campaign can be beneficial to helping balance those challenges.
But it goes back to where you need the right mix of skills and folks to focus on this so it
right.
doesn't turn into a
And it's been an area of massive underinvestment for publishers today.
I agree. So last question I want to ask, and then I'll open it up if we've got some more time, is on the data rights point that you made. So that's an interesting issue. You know, it kind of flows from the previous panel. Are there any best practices that you can suggest for publishers in negotiating data rights, thinking about that, and what are the pitfalls if they get it wrong?
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing every publisher needs to do right now is just understand what assets you have from a data perspective. People were alluding to the rise in data management and data management platforms. We believe those are going to be critical tools for any major publisher going forward. Just being able to understand what data is out there, how you can potentially use it, gives you a level of control that most publishers have never had up to this point in time. Next step from there is actually beginning to say, can we actually go out and figure out not only how we're using it, but how the third parties we work with use this. And this becomes essential not only from a business model perspective, But increasingly, we spoke earlier about regulations in this space. It's going to be important from a regulatory perspective as well. We all know about the EU cookie directive, right? We all know how that may or may not play out in the following months across various European countries as they implement their laws. That's going to put a lot of pressure on publishers to have more control over how third parties they deal with, whether it be advertisers or technology vendors that they enable on their sites, actually use that data and how they use that with their partners. So having visibility into that and using the tools out there that give publishers visibility into how that data is being used becomes absolutely critical. Until you have that level of clarity, you can't even begin to have the conversation of how do we actually control this? What do our terms and conditions look like? At what price point are we willing to let this advertiser do this but not that? Without knowing what you have, very hard to start making those more strategic decisions.
Fair enough, fair enough. Do we have time for audience questions?
We do not.
We do not, okay. So let's wrap
Given the
up.
blinking red light in front of us.
So 3 takeaways I heard. Don't fight the trend. Programmatic buying is coming, so it's about how you end up on the right side of that shift. That means more sophisticated sellers, it means yield management, and it means getting clear visibility on where your data is being used, how it's being used, so you can implement appropriate policy. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Andy.